was this place? I believe it was like a quarry storage area. There were rock piles and whatnot out here not that many years ago.
There was a crummy little one-lane asphalt road that was almost undrivable. It flooded when it rained. There were 2 gravel parking areas, totally informal, that the city then used to support the plaza. And the plaza itself was just a asphalt, lot.
And then the city came through and they paved over the broken up concrete that was there and just made it a more usable site where you could have food trucks parked there. Realized, I think, that we needed some amenities, so the first phase of the Old Town Plaza project was born, and along with the pavement, we added the restroom.
Nobody can see what's underground, obviously. And when we started the project, there's 2 large water lines that were already within the street. And we had to add another water line and another sewer line and a large storm drain line. And that stuff doesn't all just fit nicely together. And then additionally, with all the overhead poles, everybody needs their electrical and their cable and all that stuff. So we had to get that down underground too.
There were 2 projects essentially. So we had the Railroad Street, which was independent from the Old Town Plaza project. So we had to accelerate the schedule with Old Town Plaza to meet the Railroad Street project schedule.
And that would really reduce the impact to the community, to the businesses, and to the residents. Instead of having construction occur over 2 summers, it would all be done in one construction season.
The challenge that we ran into there was the Old Town Plaza was at like a 35% design level, whereas the Railroad Street project was at a more of like a 65%, which is a significant difference in the design world.
From the finance department and from my standpoint, the obstacles were redefining the costs and understanding the costs on an ongoing basis because they were changing, and then the timeline. Was the funding going to come in that we thought was going to come in? Was it going to come in time to meet the needs of the project and meet the needs of the workers and the bids and all of that?
This is the crown jewel of the area, and it was something that we all had in the back of our minds, knowing that there's a lot of businesses just in the very near area. There's an entire neighborhood just on the other side of the project. So we had a lot of eyes on us, and we wanted to make sure that we brought this project, we gave it the justice that it really deserved on behalf of the city.
My name is Stephanie Carlson, and I'm a project manager with the City of Elk Grove in Public Works in the Capital Improvement Division.
My name is Talina Barajas Chen. I'm the resident engineer with Unico Engineering for the City of Elk Grove on both the Railroad Street and Old Town Plaza Phase 2 and 3 projects.
My name is Jacqueline Lockhart, and I work for Dock and Engineering, and I was the project manager and oversaw all of the design and coordination associated with the Railroad Street project.
My name is Amy Duné. I am a senior archaeologist and a senior environmental planner with the City of Elk Grove.
My name is Jennifer Alves, and I am one of the assistant city attorneys for the City of Elk Grove.
My name is Ann Grava. I am the real property manager for the City of Elk Grove. I'm contracted through Interwest Consulting.
My name is Rachel Brown, and I'm economic development manager at the City of Elk Grove.
My name is Sarah Labashi with DNS Development. I'm a VP of Operations.
My name is Alicia Tutt, and I am the Housing and Grants Specialist.
My name is Kara Taylor Seaman, and I'm a finance analyst with the City of Elk Grove.
My name is Kristen Parsons, and I'm the engineering services manager for the City of Elk Grove Public Works Department.
I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. I still don't know. Am I even grown?
I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. I went through various stages. I think one of the first things I remember wanting to be was a nurse, and then maybe something with animals, maybe a vet or something.
When I grew up, I wanted to be a veterinarian just because I was really into dogs.
oh, maybe I'll be a nurse, maybe I'll be a teacher.
I didn't know what I wanted to be. In fact, I thought I wanted to be a nurse. You know, again, those traditional fields of what women grew up to be. I thought about being a teacher.
And then as I got older and realized I really had a love for math and science.
I was always that kid that was just like good at math, and I was the good student.
I grew up in a really small rural town, and I was interested in math and engineering, and I didn't know what was possible.
I had no idea what an engineer was. To be honest, I started college and I just picked math as my major.
When I went to college, I landed on math and education, and I was going to be a math teacher.
My stepfather was a civil engineer, and he convinced me that I really should consider civil engineering.
I was just kind of liked working on kind of projects with my stepdad and construction projects.
My dad is the one, when I was 19 or 20 years old, who introduced me to the concept of civil engineering. I just gave it a whirl, and here I am now. Thanks, Dad.
About 7th grade is when I decided I wanted to be an archaeologist. From a relatively early age, that's what I wanted to do, and it just took a while for me to figure out how to pursue it.
I wanted to be a psychologist, and lawyer is somewhat close. I was in college, and I had a guy friend who was going to take the LSAT, which is the entrance exam you need to take for law school. And I thought, he can take the LSAT, I can take the LSAT. And so I took the LSAT and got a higher score than he did. And I thought, yeah, law school must be for me.
I didn't really see, my mom have a career as a kid, so I wasn't sure that I would necessarily have a career. I think as I got into college, I found that I was really motivated and wanted to work. I got my undergraduate degree in interior design, and so I've taken a windy path to economic development.
I knew I wanted to do something great. I knew that I wanted to help people, and I knew that I just always wanted to strive for better. Even if you don't really know, just keep working hard, because eventually you'll find your niche. You'll find what fulfills you and makes you whole at the end of the day.
The pandemic affected a lot of what we did with finance. We generate forecasts to determine what kind of revenue is going to come in and which funding sources are going to provide our revenue. So when the pandemic hit, we didn't know the scope and the magnitude to which our revenues were going to be affected. Were we going to have more defaults in tax payments? Were we going to have shortfall in development? We thought development was really going to fall off at the time, but we didn't know how much, and we didn't know the extent, the timing, the extent to which these revenues were going to fall off.
So we went out to bid right before kind of the official pandemic hit, right? And so the bids came back right as things were going into lockdown. And I think the biggest issue or question we had was, do we proceed, right? Because it was such an unknown. I mean, we didn't know, would this have like a grievous financial effect on the whole state of California? Would it have an effect on the city of Elk Grove? Should we pause all projects? Should we move forward?
We had to come up with language on the fly to first understand the orders, and then understand what that meant for our contractors and our bidders, and what it meant for internal staff who are receiving those bids. But it also helped us in some ways, because there were a lot less people on the road, which resulted in somewhat faster timing and a little bit more ease, I guess, for construction activities. But it also meant that more people were at home, so there were noise impacts and that probably wouldn't have been there if COVID wouldn't have happened and folks weren't staying at home.
I was working right after receiving my master's degree. I worked for Morrison Knutson on a mega project in Boston, the Third Harbor Tunnel project, and thought that's where I would stay forever with that company. But things were changing in the world, and most of their large construction projects were overseas in areas that they couldn't send a woman to be in a controlling role, a role with authority. And the projects that they had locally in the United States or in other areas that I could go to weren't as exciting. And I had an opportunity to come back to California and to go into business for myself and have some startup work. And so I took advantage of that. So that was a huge change, moving cross country from Boston to California and setting up a new business and getting that going. And then I took a break from my career for a few years while my kids were younger and gave me some more time to spend with them. And then re-entering again the field, I didn't realize that just taking a few years off, that would be difficult and scary too.
I started out of college. It was an entry-level position, and I wanted to move up. So I would continue to interview to move up. I was great at my job, but I wasn't being promoted. And I would ask after I'd interview why, what was the feedback? And the feedback was that I was not warm and fuzzy. I go back to that all the time. And it's just my drive to get the job done efficiently, to do it right. I expect other people to do it right. So my feedback, and that's probably being a woman, you need to be more warm and fuzzy, Ann.
I'll tell you, I've had some rough moments at public meetings where somebody comments on my attire, or I get told I'm rude, or I get told to be quiet, or things like that. And I think, as a woman, those things are gonna happen, unfortunately, right? I'm waiting for the day that they don't, because being direct, knowing how to do the job right, it may intimidate some people, right? But you can't let it silence you from doing the right thing and doing the good work. And so I've always prided on myself on, even when something's not popular, still pushing what I believe is right.
In my experience, prior to working at the city in consulting, it was led by men, but the hard workers were the women. There just weren't that many opportunities. It was like, if you wanted in finance, if you want to be a leader, it's almost like you're like a Wall Street type person, and there just aren't that many women that work in those roles. And you certainly have to deal with some pretty aggressive personalities who aren't entirely supportive of people working their way up. So that was my experience. I did find that to be true, unfortunately.
I have a lot of partnerships with other economic development folks in the region. And in the region, there's a fair number of women that are involved in economic development. When I notice the difference is when we're meeting with private developers. And on that side, it's still predominantly men. And with the commercial brokers, that's predominantly men. So there's a lot of times where even a meeting we had a couple weeks ago, I was the only woman in a meeting of 6. So there are many instances where it's still, I feel I'm the only woman and notice it, but I don't feel that people take me less seriously. I feel like I've become confident in what I do and people notice that.
I've had times where I've met with people, property owners, and they haven't looked at me. They've addressed my male coworker, even though I had set up the meeting and I was responsible for the meeting. I was the one making decisions.
When I first started, I was a pretty young lawyer. I was in my early 20s, and I started out at a law firm that had no female partners, and that really struck me about would I be accepted or welcomed, or would I be promoted, right? And I pretty quickly learned that I was a strong, direct woman, and some people may not love that about me, right? And it might be difficult for them to accept.
I would say, it was a little difficult for me at first, just to feel, whether to speak up or how to speak up in that kind of setting. Some of it, I wonder how much of it was just also my being younger too in that position. I feel like I held myself back a lot. I don't know how much of that was because I was female or feeling like it wasn't my place.
I feel like when I first started, especially when I was at my first company, it pretty much was primarily men. At one point, I was the only female engineer in the office. I still don't know that I really, I noticed it, but I don't know that I let it change what I did. At Jock and Engineering, we're pretty lucky, and we have a lot of women in our office. I think sometimes the men almost feel a little bit outnumbered. So I feel that over time it's definitely become more open to females.
It's nice to know that this is a women-led project when it wasn't necessarily, you didn't necessarily have to know. It's just this very cool project that is rolling forward and is going to make Old Town kind of a premier place. It's just an absolute bonus that it's led by women. And someday we're going to get to the place where we don't have to advertise that. That's going to be a side note. It's not going to be something that we need to promote. And I can't wait for that. Hopefully it's during my working lifetime.
What was it like working on a job with all women? I'm going to say the answer I'm not supposed to say, which is I didn't notice. And I don't say that to take away from the experience. I say that because I think it's a really positive thing that I didn't notice. I think that that shows a big trend in our industry that was so heavily dominated by men. The fact that I came on board with how many other women, 4, 5, 6, who are in project management roles, and I didn't even blink an eye at it. And I think that that shows, to be honest, just to give credit, what the city of Elk Grove is really thinking about when they're putting together their projects. They just want the right people to run the job.
All the women that we've worked with on this team have just been all very professional and good at their job. And so to me, it was just kind of like, we had a good team and we made it work. I didn't really even think about the distinction until it was kind of brought up to us. And then we're like, oh yeah, that's kind of a cool thing. But, we were just doing our jobs, and that was just, we had a good team.
I can't wait till a time in our lives where we don't even think about the fact that it's all women, doing a project. It's just normal, right? And so when that happens, I guess I'll be pleased as can be.
I have 2 young daughters, and it's a great opportunity that there are more local women and national women in the news and in the media in terms of the roles that they're playing, so that as they grow up, it's more overt and they're able to see they can do anything or be anything that they want and put their minds to, and that they have the opportunity to do that. I had strong role models growing up in my mom and my grandma and those, but not as much in the public eye. And so I think it's great now that society is recognizing the work and accomplishments of women that they've had in all different professions.
I'm used to going to meetings and coordination meetings, and it's typically, I'm used to typically being the only female in the room. And I did notice when we started doing this project that there was more women in the positions, especially like civil and engineering and whatnot. I always like to think like I have a daughter, and I think about how when I grew up, it was my doctor was male, my dentist was male, her doctor's female, her dentist is female, her teachers are female. It's just interesting to see more of that. So I would say it's definitely changed. Even just the 10 years I've been working, I've been noticing more.
So this is what it would have looked like. Yeah, so you have the internal and then you have the gray on the outside. So
Through this process, I've realized that if you have the right team, you really can accomplish a lot, and you can accomplish some things that seem impossible. When I was first handed this project as a project manager and said, get this designed in the next 18 months, and it was about a 3-year project, I thought, wow, okay, I can do it, I'll figure it out. And we got the right players on the team, and we were able to do it. We were able to push it through. So I think a lot of it, what I've learned is that having the right people, having the right group of people and the right personalities, those that are determined to accomplish something, that really have a can-do attitude, that makes a huge difference. And you can accomplish things you never thought would be possible.
When I take a look back on the project, it was pretty smooth, and I attribute that to everybody feeling like they are a part of the team. So no one was trying to be right or have their voice heard. We were all just together trying to figure out the best way to make this a project that worked for the community, and whatever needed to happen in order to make that a realization. I think that's why it went smooth. In addition to just everybody that we worked with on this project was very good at what they did. They had depth of knowledge, they knew how to execute, they could envision the pitfalls that could occur down the road, and we headed those off by having solutions in place before we even got there. And that's just due to experience and knowledge about the process.
The team came up with the idea to reroute the storm drain mains and to work that around the backside of the parcels. And we obtained an easement from the developer who was developing the historic buildings and worked with them to place the storm drain so that it also benefited them as well, because they needed to tie their storm drain in. And that way we were able to fit everything in the street and make it work, but it was tough. In 3 months, we went from 30% design to construction documents, and we were able to reduce our construction management costs. And most likely, some of the construction costs were lower due to the magnitude of work as well.
We didn't have to issue any debt for this one. We were able to fund it I've been on this project for 5 years, and we've just kind of tracked it as revenue has come in through mostly through impact fees. We wanted to make an assumption that was going to hit the revenues that we could stand behind and defend to the public and defend to city council, but we didn't want to make an assumption that revenues were going to fall off by 10% when they were really going to fall off by 50%, and then our project was going to be short of the resources that it needed. So we were lucky enough that we made assumptions about revenues that were sufficient, that were fairly close, but there was no bad surprises. It was all good, 95% were good surprises, that we had more than what we thought we were going to get at the beginning of the pandemic. And now it's all just development is flooding into the city. There's a lot of development that we didn't think, it's coming back sooner than what we thought. So it's all good news from here on out.
To my car. See you ladies later. Thank you. One more time if you guys don't mind, Stephanie. We're done, right? We're done? See you.
I think going into the future, this was definitely a good and unique experience to have a team that was this many women. And I feel that it's something to be remembered, and, it might not happen again in the near future to have the entire project team comprised of women. But if it does happen again, I think it's going to be another, fun experience. But I think as we move forward, you're going to see more and more teams being women heavy, and I think it's a good thing.
I think that this project has been super fun for me, and to be involved since 2017 when we first bought the building behind us, and to see it come to life has really been a feather in my cap. And I would love to do more projects like this, and the fact that it was all women-led is even another high mark for this project that, wow, check us out.
I especially love seeing the female leads in the civil and engineering positions, because that has always been primarily males, and so I really like having that camaraderie and leadership there. It was nice having communication with other women. I felt like that really helped me feel confident too, and so I would definitely like to see more of that. It's exciting to see, and it helps you feel more or helped me feel more confident and passionate in what I was doing too. So I feel like I was really involved.
I'm hopeful that one day when you look at the table, it's evenly distributed amongst genders, races, sexual identity, whatever the case might be, because quite frankly, projects are only better when you have all perspectives involved. There are things as a woman I don't think about that a man might think about, or that a transgender person might think about. Things that affect their life every day that would make a project better if I only had that information. You bring to a project your perspective, right? And I try to think of others' perspectives, but when you don't live it, it makes it difficult. So when I look at the table that I have around me, there's a seat available for everyone.
I work with a lot of different people from various backgrounds, and the engineering world, that's no secret, it's very male dominated. And I would encourage any female that is interested in becoming an engineer to become an engineer, but you don't have to if that's not your path. I don't know that it's mine, but I appreciate the diversity that's around me. I have all different shapes, sizes, and colors around me, and the fact that I have all those different perspectives is very refreshing, and I learn something new from my colleagues every day that I probably wouldn't have known otherwise if they weren't with me. So men, women, everybody's a contributor.
I think this project is a great example of what the city can do to revitalize areas that have been a little bit neglected over time. There's been such a big focus on new development in areas that were previously agricultural in nature. This area has not been agricultural. These are the roots of our community. I think projects like this, if it were to expand throughout Old Town and revitalize Old Town in a new way, I think the community would and the city would really respond. There's been times, for example, going back to when this was all just a gravel lot and they had the Brew Fest, all of a sudden you saw people out walking and going to the little restaurants in Old Town, and that was pretty rare. So I think projects like this, it makes me excited to think that there might be more opportunities and more chances that people will just be out walking around and not in their cars, but actually like being pedestrians in a city that's maybe a little bit more pedestrian friendly.
I feel like being a part of this project has probably spoiled me, just because having something like this, in the background here, having something like this is just, it's really different. We don't have, a lot of the times our projects are roadways, and it's not as visually pleasing as something like the Old Town Plaza was to be a part of. So in that regard, I feel like this is it was an amazing highlight to have so early in my career. This is something I would definitely like to do again. Just the fact that you're working and rebuilding part of a community is just something so amazing, and it's just much more special than doing curb and gutter and sidewalks.
One of the reasons I really enjoyed this project was because it is revitalizing some of the historic elements that are down the street. So we have a couple of really nice brick buildings that were warehouses for fruit packing and some wine industry, and those are getting reused, and we're making this plaza to kind of match that historic element and just tie it all in together, including some old railroad tracks that were used for these warehouses. So, normally for a project, if you don't care about it, you rip those up, you send them off. And for this one, we thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to set them in an area where people could kind of see them, and maybe if the city wants to put a little hand cart on there one day, just to kind of bring back that feeling. And then even working with the property owners down the road, they reincorporated some rail tracks into their pavement right in the area where they would have been anyways. Give something back to the Old Town community that really respects that and wants that history to be maintained. So I'd love more projects that were able to do that, because it makes something a little bit more special for the community members.
I think the biggest thing we've all learned during this pandemic is how important it is to have community gathering space, and how much we all really need each other, and how much we all need to come together. So I'm really thankful that we were able to overcome the challenge of, what do we do? And we moved forward, and it's really a beautiful space. And I quite frankly can't wait until I can enjoy it on a personal level as a citizen of Elk Grove.
I grew up around here and spent my summers in Elk Grove. It's just really neat to see it coming back to life again. This was Elk Grove when I was a kid, and now it's becoming Elk Grove again.